Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to today's webinar, Get Started with ASP.NET, presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher. In this webinar, you'll see how to create a CRM style app in about 30 minutes that features powerful grid views and editing. Plus see how easy it is to data bind to the DevExpress menu control, grid, and scheduler, as well as create a report that can be exported straight to a PDF. And you'll learn how to create a stunning look and feel with built-in themes. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but feel free to enter your questions at any time in the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. Now, before we get started, the DevExpress team wants to know a little bit more about all of you joining us today, so I do have just a couple of poll questions for you, and here's the first one. Pretty easy. Are you a current DevExpress customer? And you can select one of the following, yes or no, and I'll give everyone a moment to get their answer in. So it looks like about 94%, 90% yes, 10% no. Perfect. And then our second question, what is your primary platform? You can select, again, one of the following, WinForms, ASP.NET, WPF, HTML5, or other. If it's other, just please enter it in the question section and so we can count those other responses. And it looks like about 56% are ASP.NET and 45% are WinForms. Great. And then here's our last question. Do you use DevExpress ASP.NET tools exclusively? So if you are an ASP.NET customer, do you use DevExpress tools exclusively? Again, yes, no, or other. Please specify in the questions window. So it looks like about 60% no and about 30% yes. All right. Thank you everybody so much for your valuable feedback. And again, thanks so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Paul Usher.
Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Paul Usher, a technical evangelist for DevExpress based in Australia. And today we're going to take a look at the ASP.NET controls, specifically from the Experience suite. We're going to start out by creating an application, implementing some toolbars and menu systems. We're going to have a look at the Outlook-inspired navigation control, and then drop on a grid view, some data views, look at the scheduler, and then attempt to create a report and publish it to PDF. All this inside 30 minutes. And we're also going to have a section for questions at the end. Feel free to add your questions in the question window along the way, and some of the team will be trying to answer those as well. So Experience ASP.NET controls. What we'll do is just spend a moment having a quick look at some of the key factors behind our thought processes when designing controls. We understand that when you're developing applications, that performance matters. So the engineering team do their best to make sure that the controls are performant in all aspects. We can see here the statistics on the grid control that we're capable of loading more than 500,000 records in under half a second. So performance really does matter. We also understand that when you're building your websites, that the visual aspect is important and that elegance matters. So we ship a wide range of themes and styles to make it real easy to create visually stunning applications. There's a couple of examples up on screen now. We've got the Metropolis or Metro style. We've got a number of Office-inspired themes such as the blue, black, and silver. And then there's some other custom ones. So soft orange, we've got the DevExpress range, light and dark schemes. There's a real nice selection in there to work with. We also understand that your website is going to be used in more than just a traditional browser, that it needs to be run everywhere. So mobile devices, whether it be phones and tablets, and also the different browsers that are out in the marketplace. So our controls are touch-enabled for the mobile sites and tested strictly on a number of leading browsers. So you get that confidence that when you ship your application, it's going to be targeted for that area. And then it doesn't matter whether you're a one-man developer band or a group of 50+ developers, productivity is important, and we understand that. So the idea is that you can drop our controls onto your design surface and be up and running quickly. And of course, all this is backed by a world-class support team. Inside our ASP.NET Control Suite, we've got over 90 Ajax-enabled ASP.NET controls, along with over 45 MVC extensions. A lot of the controls were inspired by the likes of the Microsoft Office Suite. We've got a rich collection of reporting tools and business analysis, charting. We've got our scheduling and calendar components, which allow some really nice interaction out of the box. We've got powerful layout and docking controls, a myriad of data editors that can be bound or used standalone. We've got things like barcode controls. We've got the new image slider control. So there's a real rich selection of tools in the toolbox that pretty much means it's a one-stop shop for building some amazing applications. So today we're going to start by creating an application and applying a menu and toolbar, and I'll show you a couple of different ways to set that up, be manual or binding to an actual data source. We're then going to drop in the Outlook-inspired navbar, which has the collapsible panels, show you how that can be easily themed and interact with the different pages and navigation URLs. We'll then create an employee-style data view, showing how we can bind to external picture sources as well as the Northwind database. And then we'll drop the aspx grid view in, again binding, and showing you how easy it is to do filtering, grouping, sorting, and in-place editing. You can see on screen here we've got the really cool date drop-down all out of the box. So we want to focus on as little code as possible and see how rich that functionality is. We'll then create a pivot grid and bind a chart control to that and show you how you can provide some really rich functionality to your users, again with very little code behind. We're going to drop a scheduler control onto the form, bind it to some data, and show you how the ability to create recurring appointments, set alarms, show alerts, again, really easy to bind to a data source. And then finally, we'll create a data-bound report. We're going to host that in our web page and allow you to export that to industry standard formats such as a PDF or a spreadsheet, and how easy it is to implement that inside your project as well. So let's head over to Visual Studio and start building this out. Now, when we were putting together the idea for this project, it's quite a brave move to try and cover so many controls in such a small amount of time. So some of the things that we will be doing are designed that we can show you the functionality. It may not necessarily be the way that you do it out in the field for a full project, but I'll explain some of those steps as we go along. As with all good projects, we're going to start with a file new project. I'm using Visual Studio 2012. The control set works with Visual Studio 2010 or 2012. After you've installed the Experience tools, you'll see that there's some pre-built templates. Now, certainly we recommend that you jump in and have a look at some of the entire applications that can be provided, such as the Outlook-inspired web application. For today's presentation, we're going to focus on a blank project, and we'll call this one ASP Webinar. Now, what's going to happen here, we're literally going to get a blank project with a global ASX file and a web.config, and the web.config is going to be preloaded with some of the control libraries that we will need, so the DevExpress libraries. For today's presentation, it's language agnostic. There's very little code behind anyway, so I've just started a C# project at this point. After a second, we can see the libraries are being added, and we'll be able to move along. Now, I've got some pre-created pictures that I'm going to be using. I'm going to drag those into the project to start with, and there's also one other file which I'll be using for the menu system. But there's no pre-designed code here. It's not copy and paste things. We're going to do everything from a blank canvas. I'll grab these two folders and copy. back into Visual Studio and just paste them in. So inside the app data folder, we've got a menus XML file, which I'll be going into in more detail, and then we've got some images. That's all we're starting with. So the first thing is to create a new web form. I'm going to go new web form, and we'll call this one default. That's going to get created. We will just set that as the default startup page so that we're not running backwards and forwards. Set a startup page and give ourselves a little bit of room on the screen. Okay, moving over to the design canvas. And the first thing that I want to do is to insert the menu control. Now with the DevExpress toolkit, you can find it on your toolbox. Usually you'll see the DX12.X being the version that you're running. And if you're running Visual Studio 2012, you can find most of the controls by typing aspx in the toolbox search bar here. I'm going to go menu, or M for menu, and here's the control. So I drag that onto the design surface. Now, the smart tag is shown straight away. I could choose a data source at this point, but we'll start by setting up some manual elements. So I click on the items option here. Up comes the items editor. I'm going to create 4 items, so I'll just quickly add the 4 items. You'll see them added to the panel. Click on the first item and change the text to file. The second item I want would be edit. Third item will be view. And then the final item I'm going to create will be help. So just following the Microsoft style naming convention for menus. If I wanted to add a child element under file, we come to the second button and click. I've now got a child. Change the text to maybe print, and then we'll do the same for help, and we'll add in an about option here, like so. Simply click OK on this panel, and our menu is populated. I'm going to choose a theme. Now, one of the cool things with the theme picker, depending on the control that you're actually on, you'll see a preview of that control. And I find that's really important when you're looking for themes. You're not just picking from a list and hoping and going back and forth, but you actually get a nice rendered preview of the different things that are available. So today we're going to choose the Office 2010 blue theme. I'm going to drag another aspx menu control up here. Now this time I'm going to bind it to a data source. But before I do that, let's take a look at what the actual data source is. I mentioned before we've got this menu items XML file. It contains a menu items master tree and then some root items. And they are reply, previous, next, and help. And then under reply, we've got reply sender, reply group. It's got some pre-built URLs to some image files, which is what I imported before. And pretty much that's it. So close that. Click on the smart tag and choose the data source. I'm going to create a new data source and I'm going to call it select the XML data source in just a second. Then I can navigate and choose my XML file. So XML, click OK. Browse for my data file to my app data, choose my menus XML entry. And then in the XPath expression, I just have to select menu items, since that's the parent element, and click OK. Now straight away we'll see that it's found those images that are inside that project and it's set everything up. Again, I'm going to choose a theme, and as we scroll down, 2010 blue, and I'll save what we've done so far. So the next step is that we're going to insert a quick table with 1 row, 2 columns. And we're going to look for the aspx navbar. Drag that into the left-hand column. I'm not going to choose a data source for this. I'm going to do some manual groups. So select groups, and I'm going to create one for employees, products, orders, schedule, and reports. So like with the menu selection here, I'm simply going to come down and change the text on each one. So employees, I'm going to choose orders, products, and then schedule, and finally reports. Schedule and reports. Click OK. I could come along and I could select the theme we saw before. We've got the really nice preview window coming up showing me what a navbar would look like in the different themes. But it's going to get pretty old if I've got to select a theme for absolutely every control as I build it out. So instead I'm going to head over to web.config. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom section here, and where we've got the DevExpress entry, I can change theme from DevExpress and change that simply to Office 2010 Blue, since that's the name of the theme I want to work with. Save and close. And now, after a second, the design surface is going to re-render, and we'll see that my navbar has picked up the theme that I want. So I don't have to set that theme control on every element, which again comes down to that productivity aspect of being able to design quickly. So I'm going to change the width of the navbar slightly just by dragging it out, and then I'll drag the column back. For today's example, I'm going to use an iframe. Now, I understand that's not necessarily the best choice in the real-world application. It's for speed this morning so that we get to see the right-hand panel rendered nice and quickly. Obviously, we could use an aspx splitter control, or we could use traditional master pages. Given the fact that we're working against the clock, we'll jump into source. And I'm going to replace this non-breaking space with an iframe. So iframe. I'm going to set the default source to employees.aspx, which we'll create in just a second. I'm going to change the name to _content, which we'll be using quite heavily as we set the navigation URLs. And then finally, I'm going to apply a style. We'll set the width to 1200. I'm going to set the height to 800. I'll just put PX after those. And I'm going to set the border style to none. So border of none, like so. Close my tag, close my iframe, and save. Now if we switch back to the design surface, we will see that we've got our iframe. Now you'll notice that the navbar is now dropped down into the center. We could fix that by applying a cell style or a div tag. I'm simply going to come along and choose the height option in the properties and take that to a height of 800. So it sits nicely next to my iframe control. If I run that project now, we'll see what we have so far. We should end up with an error on the iframe saying that it can't find the page, which is okay because we haven't created it yet. And what we can see straight away, we've got this nice menu system, we've got drop downs, and we've got this toolbar that's rendering with drop downs and images as well. So let's go along and create the employees ASPX page. Right click our project, we want to add a new web form, and we'll call this employees. We get the new form, we're going to switch to the design surface. So now I want to add a data view, ASPX data view, drag that into the body, and it's going to render up on screen. All the binding that I do today now is going to be based on the Northwind database. So first thing to do is choose a data source. When the wizard pops up, I'm going to choose a SQL database, hit OK, create a new connection. I'm using an instance of SQL Express, So SQL Express, and I'm going to select Northwind from my options here. Simply click OK, accept the connection string, and yes, I want to save it. So on this first section, I'm going to be working with employees, and I only want the last name, the first name, the title, and the photo path. So I select those elements and click Next. And I'm going to choose Test Query to show that I've got some data there. It's always worthwhile doing the test query just to make sure you haven't accidentally selected the wrong table or stored procedure or view. Now we'll see that we've got first name, last name, title. My copy of Northwind's got some updated photo paths to allow us to show some nice pictures along the way as well. So I select Finish, and we'll see that the layout is automatically populated with the elements. Now, the first thing I want to do is change that around slightly, so click on Edit Templates, and the template editor is shown. I'm going to remove the photo path option from here, like so. Come to the top of the page and insert a table, 1 row, 2 columns. I'm going to drag those fields and put them into the right-hand column. And then on the left-hand column, I'm going to use an aspx image control. So drag that in. I'm going to edit data bindings and simply push that or point that to the photo path field. Now all that's left for me to do is click on the control and set a height to say 100 so that it renders the image nicely there. Click on the Smart tag and click End Editing. So we can see that we've got a placeholder for our photo. We've got the elements to the right-hand side. Now, 3 rows for this example is 1 row too many. So scrolling down through the Properties page, we've got an option here that is rows per page. Simply set that to 2. If I save that, go back to my default tab, we're going to now hook up the navigate URL inside the container. So we click on the Smart tag, choose Groups, and under Employees, first thing I'm going to do is set a header height to 32, and then point the header image to one of the images we have in the project called Employees. The next step is to find the navigate URL and tell it that that's going to be bound to employees.aspx. Of course, target is important. We want to actually bind it to underscore content so it will render in the iframe nicely. We can see in the design surface that we've got our little picture. If we press save and now run, what we're expecting to see is the data view that will be rendered with all the images and the binding. So we've got our controls here, and on the right hand side we've got this really rich looking data view. It's got our image controls, it's got our bound data. I can switch between pages. If I wanted to, I could use this little option here to show all pages in one go. Now, whilst this is a bit of a whirlwind look at some of our controls, you've got so much functionality and control over every aspect of each item, whether it be at a field level, at a larger section. I can control the pager elements. What I recommend in that instance is to, when you click on an actual control, is to just have a browse through the properties and see how rich some of the functionality is that you get to interact with. So we've got our employee page now hooked up. Let's take a look at adding in a page with the data grid. We'll simply come along and add a new web form, and this one's going to be called Orders. We get our blank design canvas again. Click on Design, and now we're looking for the aspx grid view. So we have the grid view control. Drag that onto the canvas. Again, we'll choose a data source based on Northwind. We want it to be a SQL database. This time we can select the Northwind connection string from the project. Click Next. and I'm going to choose the orders query. I'll just choose orders, and I'm going to select advanced at this point and say that I want to work with insert, update and delete statements. Click next, do my test, and I've got some data there which is looking good, so I'll click finish. Now you'll notice straight away that the grid control columns get populated with all those fields. I can take a look at that a little bit more depth by clicking on columns. Inside columns I can see all the fields that came in. Now you'll notice that the field name didn't have spaces, so we do a great job of working out based on camel case what the field name should be. And using the properties on the right hand side, I can hide columns, I can change the behavior, whether they apply to an edit form, whether it's read only. There is so much rich functionality that is provided. If we take the freight column, we can even change the type of control that will be rendered in the edit fields. So I'm going to change this to a spin edit column so that when we run this we can see the effects. I'm going to click OK. This section here on the smart tag, I'm going to choose group panel. I want to enable editing and inserting on my grid, deletions, and we'll also turn on filtering. Quite literally, that's all I need to do on that form. So now I'm going to jump back to my default page, and I'm going to hook up the events on the navbar control, click on orders, start out by setting the header image, so a height of 32, set the image URL to orders, click OK, and then come down to the navigate URL. Well, instead of binding this to the top level, let's add some children, because it would be more practical if we were doing this in a real application. So we're going to come to items, which is a collection, and click on the ellipsis. We get another little pop-up editor. I'm going to create two items. The first one being, say, new orders, and the second one would be maybe shipped orders. If we click on new orders, we're going to set the navigate URL to orders, and the target will obviously become content, so it renders in our iframe. I click OK, click OK again, save my work, and then we'll run that and have a look at what's happening. So defaults for employees, I click on the new orders and the grid is rendered. We can see that using the filter row that I turned on, now all these elements can be changed at runtime or design time, so you can do some code behind and get some really rich immersed functionality for your application. But if I wanted to search just for customers with an ID of VICTE, we'll see that straight away I can filter that grid. I can then filter it further if I want by saying employee ID of 3. But we can see that it's just going to continue to drill down or filter that data out. I can choose the clear option here to get rid of that. I can sort, so by simply clicking on the column header, I get a sorted grid. So I've got my A to Z, and I can use the pager control to switch between the different pages. So it's showing me that there's 83 pages of data at the moment. I can switch between any of those elements. Let's go back to page 1. Now, it may be that I want to see the orders actually grouped. So by dragging a column header up into the group section, you'll see the really cool little arrows appear showing me what's going to happen. And then almost instantly, the grid is grouped by customer. If I expand that group, I can see the different orders that apply to that customer. And I can build multiple levels of grouping. So I'll grab the employee ID and append it to the end of the customer. And now we drill down, we can see what employees have dealt with what orders for what customer. It's that easy to add functionality. I can drag those back to the grid at any time and in any order that I want. So we've seen filtering, we've seen sorting, and we've seen grouping. It may be that I want to edit a particular order. So I click on the edit tag here and the edit box appears. If I'm dealing with a date, as I showed on one of the early slides, I've got this really nice experience for a date picker. I can click on the month and bring out a pop-up that will allow me to pick other dates. I can jump back to today. One of the things that I changed in the designer was I changed freight from just being a text field to a spin control. So over here on the right you can see that I can now spin up through those numbers. Within the spin edit control you can control every aspect. Here we're seeing it jump on the integer part of the number up by 1. We could change that to be a certain jump element. We can change it to be the decimal portion. You've got that much flexibility. And the same would be if I clicked on new order, it would let me go through and add that. Based on that SQL binding that we saw before, all the heavy lifting is taken away and I've got some rich functionality. Close out of the browser. And let's have a look at what it would take to actually incorporate some business analytics in there. So we'll come along and create another web form. This time we'll call it products. Jump to the design surface. We're going to start with an aspx panel control. So grab the panel, drag that into the surface, and just give that some height and width. So the first part is to now add the pivot grid. Drag the pivot grid onto there. Pivot grids are such a unique tool to allow you to analyze data in a snap without having to write code to do any of the lifting. So we'll choose the data source back to our SQL database where we're going to choose Northwind. Use our existing connection string. And we'll choose the alphabetical list of products. That looks good. Next, test our query. So we've got some cool stuff happening. And finish. Now if I go to the fields option in the smart tag, I can go retrieve fields, click OK, and we'll see that the pivot grid has been populated there with the fields. One option left to change, which is to turn the callbacks option off, because we're going to be binding directly with the actual chart control. So enable callbacks is false, and this time I want a web chart. So I'm going to grab the web chart and drag that into here as well. Now we'll make that a little bit wider. If we click on the smart tag for the data source, we'll see that straight away it's recognized that there is an aspx pivot grid available to the form. So I'm simply going to bind it to that. With any of the chart controls, the best place to start is always inside the wizard. So if I choose Run Wizard, I'll just wait for the binding to finish in the background. The wizard's going to allow me to select so many different elements. You can see from the chart types that we've got pretty much all chart types and aspects covered. We've got the bars, we've got stack bars, we've got 3D representations of those. We've got point controls, line controls, bubble charts. We've got spline scatters. There's pie charts and donuts and areas. It really is a comprehensive list of things that you can interact with. For today, we simply want to hide the legend. So I'm going to come down to the legend on the left-hand side and take the visible property off and click Finish. As I did with the pivot grid, I'm going to turn the callback off. So scroll down to Enable Callbacks and turn that to false and save. That's it. Go back to the default page and hook up the event handler for this. Go back to our groups, click on products. We'll set a nice header image as we did before. Choose an image from the URL. Our images folder will let us select, say, products, and then come down to the navigate URL. This time we're pointing to products, and of course we'll change the target to _content. Click OK. Let's hit save and run and see what gets represented. So as the browser comes up, we'll obviously get the employees view to start with. Click on products and we can see our pivot grid. So the first thing I'm going to do here, with the controls I can filter the data at this level. I'm just going to drag product name to be my data row. And we'll see that the chart control has rendered the information already. Now, as far as other information, I'm going to choose units in stock and drag that as a data item. We'll see that the chart is bound. It's got this really nice rendering value showing at the top. And on the right-hand side, we've got the units in stock showing. Let's see what happens when I then pivot that on another element, such as category name. So I drop my category name here, and the chart's updated in real time. And we can see on the pivot grid that we get to see some really important business information. The user can change all these options. They can interact with their data without having to pester you for new things. If we drag the category before the product name, we'll see that we've got a different style of grouping. Again, the chart is automatically bound. And we will drag product name to be a column up here. So now we can see that we've got the categories down the side and the products across the top. Really, really cool functionality. So exit out of there. And we're down to looking at a scheduler control. So sorry about resizing panels. Working with a smaller screen for the webinar can be a little annoying to watch sometimes. So web form, and we'll call this one schedule the aspx, starting out with our blank design surface. You get the idea by now that I'm going to start with an aspx prefix. I'm going to find the schedule, drag that on, and here is our aspx scheduler control. We're going to hook the source to the Northwind database. I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. Select the connection string, in that I want a custom SQL statement. So I'm going to choose next, and I'm going to use the query builder. And in this instance, I want the customers and I want the orders table. So I'll add both of those. I'm left with the query designer. Close. Just make that a little bit larger. And out of here, I want the company name, the contact name, the order ID. I want the order date and the ship date. So if I go OK, next, and test my query, company, contact, order, date, and date. Looks good. I'll hit finish. So the power behind the scheduler control is that I can map an arbitrary data source like we've done, so a custom SQL, and I want it to generate the mapping for me. So we can see that appointment ID will switch to order ID. Description, I could leave as contact name. I'm going to choose company. End date is our ship date. Start date is our order date. And in the subject, I'm going to select the contact name. So we go next, finish, and the binding's done. Now, with the properties, I can change the default view that's going to be rendered. We've got this active view type. I'm going to preset that to weak. The end user has got control over what they're looking at. We'll see in the top right hand side here, we've got that functionality. And again, you can customize the look and feel to what your end user can actually interact with. We've got the binding done. Let's switch over to the default page and wire up the URLs. So groups, schedule. Start out by choosing our header image, set the bar height, set the image URL. Let's choose schedule instead of calendar. Come down to navigate URL, schedule aspx, and target of content. Click OK, save, and let's run. So once the page renders, we'll be able to switch straight to the schedule view. And we can see that straight away all the appointments that are in there are based on our orders. We've got the little floating panel that, if I allows me to click on it, gives me a context menu. I can say open. And we've got these pre-built panels, all part of the scheduler control. So we've got the subject being the contact, the company name, we've got the start and end date. Directly inside this panel, I can choose to show different time aspects. I can change labels. So all the things that you'd expect to see in an application such as Outlook, we get to include. We've got all-day events, we've got reminders. Now, this is great out-of-the-box functionality, but you can also customize every aspect of this. You can have custom fields in there. You can do other things. We can switch to a day view. We could switch to a month view, or we can even navigate through the different day aspects using the out-of-the-box functionality. Okay, moving along, we're down to the last aspect, which is some custom reporting. How are we doing for time? Okay, looking for a new web form, and we'll call this one. So let's start by creating the custom report. So here we're going to go add new item, and I'm going to choose the DevExpress report wizard. So DExperience 12.2 report wizard, and click add. What's going to happen now is I'm presented with a nice wizard, a nice UI to set me through the different processes for building my report. I can choose from a standard report or a label report. So I'll leave it at standard. In order to create, we need to give it a data set name, so we're going to call this Northwind. I'll choose next. Yes, I want to use my existing connection. So here I could, if I wanted to, point to maybe a reporting services table or a queue. The next stage is choosing a table or view. So I'll choose orders, keep it nice and simple, and select next. Now we've got the fields. We could come through and select just the fields we want. I'm going to hit the double chevrons and select everything and choose next. And then I can add some grouping if I want. So maybe that I want to group by a region or a particular customer. We're just going to go next. Now it lets me select here what style layout I want. So we've got a traditional column-based report. We've got the labels on the left and the data on the right. We've got a tab style report where it's going to be presented more like a spreadsheet, or a justified to give you some nice layout options. I'll choose the column and I'll leave it in portrait mode. And then the final step is what style. So I can choose a default layout for my report. I'll stick with bold, and then I'll give it a name. So order report, and finish. We'll see on the design surface that the report is then laid out for me. As with everything else we've looked at today, I've got complete customizational control over how the look and feel happens. I can preview the report directly inside the browser. So here we can see I can navigate through the pages. I can scroll through. I get to look at how the report's going to be in real life, which is really handy, so you don't have to start the project and render it. Back to the designer, and we'll close that. So we now have a report. What I want to do now is create the form that's going to be hosting that. So a new web form, and we'll call that one reports. Back on the design surface, we'll start up by doing aspx and R for reports. And that's the exception that breaks the rules. So we'll do report, and I'll start by dragging the report toolbar up onto the canvas. You'll see out of the box we've got a rich toolbar. You can interact with the different elements on here. You can work with the buttons. The next thing I want to do is drag the report viewer control onto the canvas. Now the report viewer allows me to select which report I want to bind to. So I'm going to choose that one. The report toolbar allows me to select which viewer I want to bind to. So I'll select report viewer 1. And quite literally, that should be it. So if we jump back to the default page or a home page, add the plumbing for the report mechanism. So click on groups, reports, quickly set those default image properties, images and reports, and then set the URL. So navigate to reports.aspx, and the target would be _content. Click OK, save, and let's run. Once this renders, we'll jump down to the reports option. Click on reports, and we can see inside the browser we've got the report toolbar and the report rendered. We can scroll through the pages. We can print directly to the user's printer. We can print just a current page. If we click on the save option here, it would export the default type, so PDF straight to disk. I can export to a PDF. I can export to Excel spreadsheets, RTFs, HTML files, CSVs, or even just a flat image. And if I choose PDF and choose the save option, it's going to render that straight to another web browser for me. I'll just resize this while it's doing it, to which I've got the Adobe plugin, and I can save the PDF out from there if I wanted to. Great functionality straight out of the box for reporting. So to recap, we've got a nice menu bar system and toolbar system in place. We've got the collapsible, expandable navbar. We've got the data view that we can interact with. We've got the grid view with all its rich functionality. We've got the pivot grid, the scheduler control, and the reporting. Now if we can create all this with zero code in under an hour, imagine how much functionality you can add and how rich your client experiences will be overall. What we'll do now is head over and see what questions have come in. Amanda?
Hey, Paul. So we've had a ton of questions that have been coming in, and our very own Mahul Harry and our and Dave Medlin have been on the back end answering a lot of these questions. But let's see. There's some that are been left open. Let's see. Can you easily add scroll bars to the grid view from Deborah?
Absolutely. You can actually add a scroll view control, which will, depending on the content, resize and allow you to scroll up and down. A lot of that will come into the design of your web page and how you want to display some of that information. It may also be that you want to implement some tab bar controls as well, so that you're not scrolling all the time, but you can present a really nice collection of information using tabs.
Great. And then from Shane, what about themes for reports?
What about themes for reports? Not sure I fully understand the question, Shane, but we've got the built-in styles for creating the report. Was it something specific that you wanted to do? Maybe you can drop me an email after, and I can cover that in a little bit more depth, depending on the question.
Okay. We had a lot of questions about, does this work with Oracle and with MySQL? The answers were yes. And
absolutely.
Let's see.
Using standard data services, so pretty much most the binding is really, really powerful. Even custom classes that implement some of the IEnumerable types you can bind to. There's some phenomenal things happening in the marketplace I've seen customers using the reports for.
Great. Well, that looks like all of the questions.
Excellent. Well, just a quick plug on the Expressway tour. Today was obviously a high-level view at some of the controls we've got. With over 95 controls in the toolbox, there's a lot more that we can go into. We've got our CMO, Dave Mendelin, and Jared Potter, who's a designer over at 6th Avenue Studios, doing a around-the-world tour, hitting Australia on the 18th of April and the 22nd. It's a free event. It's a half-day event, and lunch is provided. If you want to see how to take an application from concept all the way through to design and walk away with both a full belly, the source code, and the assets for it, jump onto that URL and register. Places are limited, and it certainly will be a worthwhile event attending.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. All right, everybody, thank you so much for all of those great questions. You can visit devexpress.com/webinars for upcoming webinar sessions, and you can also visit that same URL to find all of our previous webinars if you want to watch those at your own convenience. All right, thanks again to Paul Usher, and of course, thank you all for joining us. Let's see what develops. Bye-bye.